Everything you know about a courtroom probably came from television, which means almost everything you're bracing for is wrong. You've probably pictured some version of a tense cross-examination or a dramatic reveal that changes everything in the room. Maybe you've rehearsed what you'd say if someone put you on the spot. Almost none of that is what an actual day in court looks like for most people going through this. No one's about to object dramatically from across the room. Nobody's going to ambush you with a surprise witness. The real version of this is quieter, slower, and a lot more like sitting in a waiting room than starring in a scene. Divorce Smarter with Claude. Episode 11. Walking into court for the first time. Before anything dramatic happens, if anything dramatic happens at all, there's waiting. A lot of it. Court schedules run on their own timeline, and cases get called in whatever order the day actually allows, not necessarily the order printed on the list. Bring something to occupy your mind during that stretch. A book, a podcast, anything that isn't just sitting with your own thoughts for what can end up being hours longer than expected. That single practical choice makes a bigger difference to how the day feels than almost anything else on this list. The room itself tends to be plain and administrative, closer to a formal office than a movie set. People speaking quietly to their own lawyers in hallways, paperwork changing hands. It's serious, but the seriousness shows up as procedure and formality, not confrontation. Knowing that in advance changes what you're bracing for. You're not walking in to perform under pressure in front of a room watching you. Most of the actual work happens in quiet, procedural exchanges, often between the lawyers, while you sit and wait for your specific moment. Your lawyer, obviously, sitting with you or near you. The other side and their lawyer, usually not close enough that you're forced into conversation. Court staff, keeping things moving, and whoever's presiding over the day, the person whose job is to hear what's presented and make a decision or set a next step. There might be a handful of other cases worth of people in the same waiting area too, all going through some version of their own version of this same day. It can help, oddly, to notice that. You're not the only person in the building having the hardest day of their year. Everyone around you is carrying something similar. That's genuinely most of it. It's a smaller, more procedural cast than most people picture beforehand, and once you've actually seen it once, it rarely feels as overwhelming the second time. The practical side is mostly things this series has already built. Your organized document folders from episode 3, copies of anything you might need on hand, not just stored somewhere on a phone you might not get reception to access. A clear, current sense of what's actually being decided that day. Add the practical basics too, the ones nobody thinks to mention because they seem obvious until the morning you're rushing. Know where you're actually going, including parking or transit, well before the day itself. Plan to arrive earlier than feels necessary. Dress the way you would for a formal, important meeting, because that's functionally what this is. That last part matters enormously, and it's worth saying plainly. What's actually happening on any given court date varies enormously depending on where you are and what stage your case is at. This episode can't tell you the specific process for your specific hearing, because that genuinely depends on your jurisdiction and your case. Your lawyer can and should walk you through exactly what today is for before you ever arrive. 2 practical jobs here, both logistical rather than legal. First, turning everything you need to bring into a simple checklist, so the morning of isn't the first time you're thinking about what actually needs to be in the bag. Second, helping you prepare good questions for the conversation with your lawyer beforehand, the one where they explain what to expect that specific day. Going into that conversation with clear questions instead of general anxiety gets you a much more useful answer back. Neither of these jobs involves guessing at procedure. Both are about making sure the parts you can fully control, what you bring and what you ask, are handled well, so your energy on the actual day goes toward the parts you can't control instead. Use this a few days before any court date, once you know roughly what it's for. I have a court date coming up for my divorce. I'm going to describe what I understand it's for and paste some notes about documents and information I might need. Help me turn this into a simple checklist of what to physically bring, organized clearly, plus a reminder list of practical things like arrival time and what to expect logistically. Don't guess at legal procedure. Just help me organize what I already know. Paste your notes underneath. What comes back is a checklist, not legal guidance, and that distinction is exactly the point. Use this before your pre-court conversation with your lawyer so that conversation actually gets you what you need. I'm meeting with my lawyer before an upcoming court date, and I want to make sure I ask the right questions. I'm going to describe what I know so far. Help me build a short list of questions to ask about what to expect on the day, what my role will be, and anything I should prepare that I might not have thought of. This is the same agenda-building skill from episode 9, aimed specifically at the one conversation that matters most before a court date. An important boundary, maybe the most important one in this entire episode. Court procedure is genuinely, significantly different depending on where you live and what your case actually involves. Nothing in this episode, or anywhere in this series, is a substitute for your own lawyer walking you through your specific hearing. If anything in this episode ever seemed to conflict with what your lawyer tells you about your specific day, your lawyer is right. Not because this content is unreliable in general, but because they know your jurisdiction, your case, and your judge in a way nothing general ever could. This helps with logistics, checklists, and calming the general fog around an unfamiliar process. It does not, and was never meant to, tell you what will actually happen procedurally in your specific case. That conversation belongs entirely to you and your lawyer, and it's worth having it explicitly rather than assuming you already understand what today involves. One honest thing worth maiming: even a purely procedural, uneventful court date can feel enormous because of what it represents, not necessarily because of what actually happens inside the room that day. It's possible to walk out of a 15-minute hearing that went completely smoothly and still feel wrung out for the rest of the day. That's not an overreaction. It's a reasonable response to a significant moment, even when the moment itself, mechanically, was small. That reaction is completely normal, and it doesn't mean anything's going wrong. Bring someone if you're allowed to, and it would help. Give yourself the rest of that day off from anything else demanding, regardless of how the actual hearing goes. The weight of the moment is real, even when the moment itself is quiet. That closes out the core of the Prepare track: lawyer meetings, mediation, and now court. Together with the Understand, Organize, and Write tracks, that's most of what this process actually throws at you. Coming up, this series turns to getting more out of Claude itself: the settings, the habits, and the small workflow choices that make everything in this series faster to actually use. Most of what makes court frightening is the not knowing. You won't walk in as an expert, and you don't need to. You just need to walk in a little less in the dark than you were before today. Whatever happens on that specific day, you'll get through the hours it takes, and you'll come out the other side of it having done the hardest part, which was simply showing up. One step at a time. See you in the next one.